Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take for Market Rebellion on this Wednesday morning. And yesterday we had a little bit of pressure that followed up the previous pressure on the markets. And boy, as we moved throughout the day, all the way into that final 2 hours, we were getting hit pretty strong. You look at the Dow was down about 300 points or thereabouts. And you look over at the NASDAQ, similar, down about 140 points. So significant moves to the downside. The NASDAQ really didn't recover a whole lot. It finished down about 130 in the final couple hours, and the Dow finished down about 256. So it recovered a little bit off of those lows. But one thing that we have seen a return of has been volatility, and volatility definitely spiked up. We had some volatility somewhere in the, call it from 17 to 1970. So one of the higher levels that we've seen in a little while anyway. And so a pretty significant move to the upside. We also had crude, which was had been moving to the upside. Little bit of a pullback yesterday and a little bit of a pullback even today. 10-year was dropping as well. So the combination of all those different things, we had some weakness in energy, particularly those beta names, which are all down significantly, in many cases down 5% or more. Devon and Oxy and Schlumberger and those kinds of names. Financials had some pressure on them. Consumer discretionary. We also had the industrials, and then throw in techs and semis. That really makes sense on why we were seeing the kind of pullback that we were seeing yesterday, which was just adding to the previous day. But crypto still front and center, talking Coinbase. People are watching that very, very closely. That got hit pretty hard again. So that's moved fairly significantly off of that opening day, over 400 plus, and now closer to that 300 level as it's been getting pushed to the downside. And the high multiple names certainly were under pressure too. The Datadog, Zscaler, CrowdStrike, you go through the list, Peloton, a lot of those various names definitely getting hit yesterday. After the close, it was Netflix following through with what looked like yesterday's kind of trade. And a lot of that had to do with some of the slowing down that we were seeing because of the reopen. And you start to look at some of those numbers and you start to wonder, well, where does this position others that are some of the competitors that have moved into that space? Or are they losing to those competitors? A lot of questions being asked. In any case, it was down about 11% yesterday, down about 6 to 8% today. 34 million contracts yesterday. I keep hearing folks on television and elsewhere saying, hey, volumes are low. That's not low, folks. Those are still pretty good volumes. Yes, we're off that 40 million pace, although we hit some 40 plus million on Friday. But we're still mid-30s. That's very, very nice volume and continuation of what we were seeing throughout 2020 and the start of this year. Just some really, really strong volume. So I would disagree when I hear that some of the volumes look a little bit lower. I don't know what they're looking at. So today it's hump day. Everybody's kind of coming in, yawning and all the rest of that stuff. The market looked like it was yawning a little bit early on. It started out in the pre-market. The Dow was flat. You look over, a little bit of pressure on the NASDAQ. Obviously, some of that Netflix influence, and then you start looking over at the high multiple names. They look like they were going to be getting pressed to the downside as well. We get to the opening. We're down about 40 points still on the NASDAQ. The Dow just kind of floating around. Well, that changed in a hurry. As a matter of fact, in the last 30, 40 minutes or so, we've watched the market actually go from that level where we were just relatively flat, maybe even down 10 or 15 points. We actually zoomed all the way up close to 200 points to the upside on the back of materials, industrials, energy, which completely made a flip. It was absolutely amazing because energy was leading to the downside. Energy crude was down about 2.5%. It was trading to 61s. A lot of pressure on some of those energy names. Well, that changed in a hurry, and certainly we are seeing some of that. I mentioned some of those high multiple names that were under pressure. And, those are the names that you hear me talk about frequently, but DocuSign and Peloton and throw in Coinbase, Twilio, Zscaler, those kinds of names, they were down and probably are starting to make a little bit of a comeback along with some of the other areas of the NASDAQ, because the NASDAQ was down early. Nothing significant, but when you're down 40 or 50 points and you make a pretty big sharp flip into the positive territory, that is something that's something we haven't seen as much of lately. And it'll be interesting to see, are we going to be able to hold on to some of these gains as we've made this sharp flip. Volatility index 18 to 19. It's been in this sort of range since it started to break a little bit to the upside over the last couple of weeks. And let's not forget, we go back just a few weeks ago, and I'm going to be on the halftime report today. I'm going to be talking a little bit about this because I think it's worth noting that when we were trading closer to 15, 16 on the VIX, which isn't that long ago, just a few days ago even, but about a couple of weeks ago, we had some monstrous VIX buying out in July. And some of that, you're starting to see a little bit of that start to make a bit of a move because of the fact that we've made this move, call it from 15 towards 19. And obviously that VIX trade, which was at 25, they actually hedged it against buying the 25 VIX and selling the 40s out in July. That's something that I think you just got to keep in the back of your mind, because that was a monstrous trade. And we talked about that one when I was on the halftime report as well. So energy, yeah, that was one of the weaker points. Financials, that was one of the weaker points. That's flipped around a little bit. We've had healthcare holding up pretty good. So we've had a pretty interesting morning already and a lot of movement just in this first hour of trade. So I got two unusuals, then we got to go. We got the halftime report. So, and by the way, I'll be on the 5 o'clock show tonight with Melissa Lee and the gang as well. O is my first one. That's Realty Income Corp. This is not a name that we talk about or see very often, but it's a retail REIT. And it was pretty interesting because today it's hitting 52-week highs. Now with the stock trading close to, call it 69, we had a buyer of 2,000 of the May 70 calls. So getting a little bit of time, not a huge chunk of time, but a little bit of time on these May 70 calls. They were going for about 75 cents up to about 90 cents. So that one stuck out to me for unusual because of the fact that we just don't often see that specific name. And it's pretty interesting because somebody's buying this as it's hitting those 52-week highs, as I mentioned. So that's definitely something that stands out as a little bit unusual as well. So Marathon Petroleum is my next one. That's MPC. And with the stock trading around 52 and a quarter or somewhere in that range, we had a buyer of 9,000 of the July. Yeah, we actually pushing out even a little bit further, going to the July 55 call. So buying some time, looking for energy to recover even more so than it has, and buying those July 55 calls. And oh, by the way, they're hedging those by selling the July 60 calls. But focus on the one they were buying, which was going for about $2.85. So these are not cheap. It's a lot of air. You're buying time, and you're looking, those folks are looking for a pretty substantial move to the upside in one of the, and I like to refer to these as the beta names, because they certainly do move with some huge thrust, both to the downside, like we've seen yesterday, down 5% or more in a lot of cases, and to the upside as well. So those are your two unusuals for today. Folks, hopefully you understand what I'm talking about. When I talk about a spread, you're trying to take some of the risk off, but you're also limiting some of your upside. A lot of that is just a lot of the trade and a lot of common trade that people do more and more under certain circumstances. We see that all the time. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out the gang over at Market Rebellion. They are unbelievable and the best educators in the business. Have a great day of trading. I'll see you at noon.